Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Did you know that Missouri has a mastodon site? Well, today we're here to visit it and I'm very excited about this one. This is just a little bit south of the St. Louis area. Super cool. Found this while I was doing a little bit of research about this area and was blown away by some of the great reviews. So let's go check it out. Now, before we go inside, I noticed there's a couple of trails just leading out from this area. There's also some really nice benches. The landscaping here is gorgeous and the building itself looks really unique. So this is going to be an interesting one once we get inside. I'm looking forward to learning a little bit about this area of Missouri through this, but also potentially finding a patch. Okay guys, I just got to go in and watch the video about this. It's about 15 minutes long and I definitely encourage you to do that. It puts everything into context about the Clovis people and the mastodons and how they previously thought that the Clovis people had only gone after mammoths, which we've seen at a Texas dig site on one of my very first adventures. But in fact, the mastodons also quite interesting, but I also learned the difference between the mastodon and the mammoth, and that is fascinating and it's great context before we start into the museum itself. Now they do have a patch, so I'm going to go ahead and pick that up. There is a group coming, so whenever they get here it might get a little bit louder, so I'll try really hard to share everything that I can with you guys. Starting off, we learn about the Paleo-Indians that lived in the environment of lush flora, vegetation, and diverse fauna. And these people would have been foraging off the land, but also they would have been fierce hunters that would have used different styles of points in order to get their game. And these are credited with hunting through a lot of the different pieces of this particular time frame. Now, originally these people were thought to have been here more recently, but in fact now, because they have found that they were in the area of the mastodons through some scientific proof that they may have been here 10,000 years ago. Now, how did they get here though? That's a good question. There's a lot of different theories and the video discusses 4 different passages which scientists have extensively gone through and tried to figure out, but they still haven't drawn a clear-cut reasoning as to why they would have been here in the United States. But they were nomadic people, they traveled, they had nomadic societies, they were very well structured, and overall they have a lot of things that we have now found out about them that teach us about the earliest of people and what that might have looked like. Very different than modern day St. Louis today, let me tell you. So on the displays you can also see what some of the stone implements of the Clovis culture looked like. Again, this is a Paleo-Indian period between 11,500 and 10,900 years ago. These are not to scale, but you can see how they would etch these out and work away the pieces of stone to create these points, which they would then use to hunt. But there's a bit more about the early inhabitants here in the museum as well, telling us a bit more about some of the points that they have found over time, and also how they have determined which groups of people actually those belong to. And so as we look through, you can see a variety of different stone points that they have found, including these Clovis points, which would have belonged to the earliest people of this area, the ones that we found with the mastodons. So how do you know that they were the ones who took down the mastodon? Well, that's where this particular dig site comes in. This dig site was found because some random bones were seen sticking out of the river, and they were called into question, what is this? And someone came and started to remove these bones and found them to be quite fascinating and put them on display in the St. Louis area for a bit. However, they weren't really assembled correctly, and eventually they were sold off to Britain, and they were put in a very large museum and reconfigured, and they determined it was a mastodon, an American mastodon. And they thought, oh wow, that's kind of crazy because we didn't know that was there. But then it continued forward and more research was done and more digs were done as time passed. And ultimately, in one of the more recent digs, they found an actual Clovis point inside of one of the bones, clearly a takedown point. And so that's how they were able to finally link for sure a theory that they had had for a long time that the Clovis people might be responsible for this based on what they had found in the layers previous. And so there we go. There's the history in a nutshell. But there's a lot more to see here, so let's go around the room and get some more brain wrinkles. You can see reconstructing a mastodon takes a lot of work, and so there's a lot of moving pieces well beyond when it is removed from the ground itself. And here we see a team at work, and this is from the Illinois State Museum, that we're seeing them piece this thing back together very, very carefully. So when they were finding them, at first, they looked very similar to a mammoth, only to realize they were a completely different creature. Mammoths like to eat the vegetation on the ground, but mastodons eat the vegetation up high. And so a lot of times they would be in these beautiful forests eating things from atop. Now, why did they ultimately go extinct? A lot of theories on that one too. They are exploring all of those still to this day because there's no true reasoning as to why they can say that all of the animals of that time fell into extinction all at once. However, the ever-changing landscape definitely did affect them, and they can prove that the trees that we now have here are very different than the trees we might have had in the past. And so food supply could be one of those. However, as we move around, we get to see a few of the other interesting things that no longer exists that's from that time frame. That's kind of interesting, and it makes you think, okay, so the things that I'm used to seeing right now, in 1,000 years, will they be here? I don't know. They have great reference materials here like these, so you can look on at the scene ahead of you and then also have context as to who these were and what they were. And you can see here, for example, this big guy right here is a Harlan's ground sloth, which is no longer in existence. Now, while I'm here, a field trip just came in, so you can probably hear a little bit more. But I think this is great because they do have special programs for kids, and they also do ranger talks and things like that. So definitely look into those if you have the kiddos. Now, one thing I will say, this is not a dog-friendly site, so you can't bring your doggos, but that's okay because there's so many other cool things, and it being a smaller exhibit, you should come here anyway. Now this is pretty neat because it talks about the megafauna that was in Missouri, and then there's a corresponding map with little dots. Each of these dots indicate a different kind of animal that is no longer with us, but has been found right here in Missouri, including the mastodon, the mammoth, the ground sloth, the stag moose, the dire wolf, the short-faced bear, and the saber-toothed cat. Can you imagine? These are their teeth. So you have the crown and the root, and then also the crown and the root for a mastodon tooth. You can see they're very different. Now this is a great place, and I've thoroughly enjoyed going through, and I learned a few interesting things. For example, the original bones were found right in the river, and after all of the discovery of figuring out that the Clovis people were actually from this area and here much earlier than people thought that the original man were, there were a lot of interesting things that happened after that. For example, there was one group of 4 women who saved this park from basically being lost as a result of the construction of Highway 55. Highway 55 started to come in, and these women said, no, we don't want to lose this important part of our history, and we want to preserve it. And so they stood up and worked with state legislators, and sure enough, it became a protected site, and in 1987, it became what we now know today as the Mastodon State Historic Site. And I think that that's just really cool. I found at different places, there's been a variety of different people who've been involved in preserving and protecting locations. And so these women, they were the cog that stood by and made sure that this site was still available for us today. And because of that, you can actually hike down to the bone bed. There's no active digs right now going on. However, you can see it, and there's an information kiosk down there. There's a couple of other little trails that you can take. There is a garden that you can sit and just watch the birds and butterflies. And all of that is now available for myself as a traveler, you as a traveler, or for field trips like the one that just got here today. Now, I also learned some other interesting facts. Did you know that a mastodon went through several sets of teeth in their lifetime? We go through 2. They went through 6. It's kind of wild. But also on display, they have some other bones, and these bones are from various other animals that they know for a fact have been in this region, that they have found, and they are able to share with us what those bones might have looked like in comparison to other bones. They also have on display a mammoth jaw that was from Florida. It's really, really neat, and the more that you explore, the better that you will find this experience to be. Now, I just wanted to come by and tell you guys about this more than anything, because so often we don't even know these places exist, and they might be right in our backyard, but they have such amazing brain wrinkles that video alone just really changed the way that I think about some of the other sites that I've been to, and I think it will for you guys too. Remember guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. Places like this historic site definitely are that. Till next time guys, bye!